Welcome. Assalamualaikum. Welcome to the annual NCPCF Families Conference. If you only knew how much discussion went into the acronym for this organization. There were a lot of debates. Very tense. And I think I now, after many years, can actually remember what it stands for. National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. Or is it Preservation of Civil Freedoms? They both the same. Thanks a lot for coming. And I'm just moderating, so we're going to have actually more interesting speakers. Where did I think this is supposed to be a talk show format. Oh, but anyway, first Mel is going to speak. So anyway, I'm going to call up the first speaker, Mel Underbakke. Baki. I'm pronouncing it the original Scandinavian way, Mel. Dr. Mel Underbakke is a co-founder and executive director of NCPCF. He holds a doctorate degree in interdisciplinary education and is an educator and researcher, formerly at the University of South Florida. He also funded Friends of Human Rights shortly after the arrest of Dr. Samuel Ikraan on terrorism charges in 2003. In 2008-2009, after the release of the documentary USA vs. Ikraan, it was very good. I recommend watching it. I think it's available on YouTube. It's a really good documentary, actually. She and Fred Bryant toured the U.S., screening it more than 60 times on college campuses and in churches, mosques, libraries, and community centers. During this time, she learned that many other cases of innocent Muslims who were being targeted by the U.S. government in its ongoing, quote, war on terror, unquote, and is focused on calling attention to the current wave of preemptive prosecutions of these innocent people, as well as the erosion of civil freedom that has affected Americans since the events of 9/11. So, I am very honored to introduce my friend and someone I admire profoundly for having courage and commitment in a time when so many of us fail to do so. So, Mel is going to get up and do an overview of NCPCF.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Okay.
Anyway, I'm going to talk for just a few minutes to give you an idea of what it is that we do and how we got our start, which you heard a little bit of from Jack. As you know, after 9/11, our government started going after people for thought crimes. Something they really have always done to some extent, but it became standard policy, it seemed, at that time. So they would be prosecuting people preemptively for crimes that they thought they might do sometime in the future. And one of these early prosecutions was Dr. Samuel Ikraan, who was indicted in February 2003 and charged with supporting the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. I'm going to show you just a short video that summarizes it. And these clips came from the documentary that Dr. Brown mentioned, the USA vs. Ikraan, which is, I think if you Google that one, you can come up with it to watch it in its entirety. having technical problems, I'm sorry. Okay, so again, the Friends of Human Rights formed around his case. And in this case, there were 3 other co-defendants, and none of them were found guilty of terrorism. But only one of them went free, that was Hassan Balut. Another one, Samia Kumide, was deported, and Hatem Faris, who is now our development director, was imprisoned on a totally unrelated charge, and he spent over 3 years in a communications management unit in a cell about the size of our replica in the lobby. So if you step inside that, you can get a sense of what it is like to be in solitary confinement, and imagine being there 23 hours a day for weeks on end. And a majority of the prisoners in the CMUs are Muslim, and the CMUs are very restricted. All communication with the outside world is monitored, phone calls are very limited, and no contact visits are allowed. The children who visit look at their fathers through glass, and they talk to them over the telephone. They're not even allowed to give them a hug. And it's nice, I spent a lot of time in the courtrooms with those 4 men, and so it's nice that some of them are out, and one of them is here tonight, but Hatem is.
Speak directly into the mic now.
Oh, sorry, okay. All right. And then meanwhile, in Albany, New York, Kathy Manley, who is our legal director, and she's right up here, and Steve Downs, a former executive director, were having a quite similar experience. They were involved with Yassine arrest case, which is another case of a crime-free prosecution. And they co-founded Project Salam around his case. And they also found that there were many other cases, and they began putting them together in a database. And I'm just going to show you some of the names that they came up with early on. This list has continued to grow, and now there are, okay, thank you. And so now they have over 800 names on the list, and still growing. While these names are scrolling, I just want to tell you a little more about NCPCF. Dr. Sammy invited us all to meet at the apartment in Virginia, where he was under house arrest, to discuss forming a coalition to work together. And so in 2010, Friends of Human Rights and Project Salam joined with other organizations to form the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. We think it is important to educate the public about the erosion of civil liberties in the U.S. today, to give voice to the prisoners and their families, and to work to defend and preserve the civil rights of everyone. And we have a lot more information out in the lobby, and there's also a sign-up sheet for our news digest, so you can stay in touch with the work that we're doing. And before I end, I just want to give you a couple of examples of the types of cases that concern us. More information about these in the back also. But one of the very outrageous early cases was the Holy Land Foundation. This was the largest Islamic charity in the country, and it did a lot of good in the United States and around the world. The foundation was targeted because they provided help for people in Palestine, and our government really didn't approve of that. So 5 men in that foundation went to prison basically for feeding the hungry. 2 of the founders, Ikraan Abdurahmān and Ghassan Alashi, were sentenced to 65 years. And they both have some family members here tonight also. Another really horrifying case is that of Ahmed Abu Ali, and his sister Mariam is here tonight, and she'll be talking about that later in the program. So I'll let her tell that story to you. There's one other case that I was closely involved with, Zia Jagi. The federal government wins most of their cases, and most of the time they accomplish this by getting the defendant to take a plea deal. But Zia, he refused to take a deal, and he refused to admit guilt when he knew he was innocent. He also did not want to lie and testify against his co-defendants. And the man who was actually tried in this case was Daniel Boyd. Because of his failure to cooperate, Zia was sentenced to 31 years, whereas Daniel Boyd only got 18 years. And Zia's actual conviction was conspiring to provide material support to an unknown terrorist organization at an unknown time in an unspecified place, which must leave you wondering what it was that he actually did, that he went to prison for 31 years. And another very sad case that was close to home in Tampa was that of Sammy Osmakak. His brother Avni would have liked to be tonight, but he had to work and could not come. And the Osmakak family had a house and a very successful bakery in St. Petersburg, and they lost everything because of paying legal fees for their son. But Avni asked me to tell you his story. His brother Sammy had no money, no possible way of carrying out any sort of plot. But highly paid FBI informants planned it all for him. They provided the plot, they provided everything, and recorded everything he said. And so Sammy was entrapped and arrested. And like all of the terrorism trials that I attended, it seemed this trial was being held in the Twilight Zone. The most ludicrous thing to me was that the key government witness testified under a pseudonym and from behind the screen. And even the defense lawyer had no idea what his true identity was, so it was impossible to vet his credentials. And the jury did not know that, it was happening. And also, psychologists had testified Sammy was mentally ill, but nonetheless, the jury found him guilty and sentenced to 41 years. So he was convicted in June of 2014. And since that time, he hasn't had any visitors because he is in prison over 1,000 miles from his family. And a different thing about this case was that usually the FBI and the informants only record interactions with the defendant, the target of this thing. In this case, they forgot to turn off the recorder, and some of the recordings of their conversations about the difficulties of getting Sammy to cooperate with them have actually surfaced, and so now the family is trying to raise $50,000 for a new trial, but that's a difficult sum for them to come up with. And just in closing, I'm trying to remind you of the Pastor Niemoller poem. First they came for, and then they came for the Jews, and I remained silent because I wasn't a Jew. I want to close with a modern version of this that I saw on Twitter, of course. At first he came for the Muslims, and I said, guys, let's take a wait-and-see approach here. And then he came for the Mexican Americans, and I said, let's not be sore losers just because the other guy won. And then he came for the press, and I said, what makes this country great is our peaceful transitions of power. And then he came for the women, and I said, try to have some compassion for the frustrations of the other side. And then he came for the black community, and I said, I know it sucks, but wait 4 years. And then he came for me, and I said, how could this have happened? I did everything I could. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mel. It's so, like when I was watching this video, I get really emotional because I didn't go through anything. My wife's family, they went through all the stuff. I got married to her after most of the bad stuff happened. But, our kids are like getting old enough now, they start to understand things they see. And my 4-year-old kid saw this poster of the movie, and he asked, like, why is Tabitha crying? Because in the picture she's like crying. And my wife was like, someone said something about CEDU and it wasn't true. And then he wanted to call my mother-in-law. He was really worried about her. He wanted to call her on the phone if she was okay. So, things are getting, time goes on, and a whole generation of people comes into dissensions and understanding, and they see the effects of these arrests and this treatment of the Muslim community. And we have to raise people and kids to be strong and proud of who they are, and to never be intimidated by the images they see. One of the big changes that happened to me when I, really got to know my wife's family. When we first met, if I used to have lots of arguments with her dad. He was under house arrest, so he could go anywhere and discuss stuff with you. And bring up something, I was always taking the government's side because, if the government said something, I was like, I believe them. Someone arrests somebody, that's probably they did something wrong, and you get really intimidated by police, really intimidated by someone with their hands cupped behind their back. And it took me a while seeing, talking to him and understanding what had happened to him and his family to realize how this power is used to create impressions of truth. And it, just because someone has handcuffs on behind their back doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. It just means that someone's powerful decided to do that to them. And, my parents were good parents, and they tried to teach me as best they could, but we didn't experience anything like this. And it wasn't until, I experienced it for myself, and I understood what it was like to be at the receiving end of the power of the government. And, I think that out of messages we can give to children, whether it's our children or many children as will listen, many families can reach, is to teach their children not to be afraid of this, and not to be fooled by what they see, not to be lured into believing people are guilty when nothing's been proven against them. Okay. Do you want to say anything else, Mel? Mel's very wonderful person. I'm always happy when she and Fred come by. I get to have dinner with them. Like I said, I just courage she has. I don't have that. I have a lot of respect for that. Okay, now keynote address, correct? By my friend, and he's technically younger than me, but I look up to him. But that's only because he's like a foot taller than me. But I also look up to him ethically. Sheikh Omar Suleiman, who is the founder and the head of the Ikraan Institute for Islamic Research, that I'm also, I guess I work for. I'm the director of research for it. So I write a lot of things and edit other people's papers. We have a lot of great research, which I recommend, on all sorts of controversial and confusing issues. And Sheikh Omar Suleiman is also an adjunct professor of Islamic Studies at the Graduate Liberal Studies program at Southern Methodist University, Eastern Texas. He also is a resident scholar at Valley Ranch Islamic Center and co-chair of Faith Forward Dallas and Thanksgiving Square. He holds a bachelor's in accounting, which is useful, and a bachelor's in Islamic law, a master's in Islamic finance, a master's in political history, and is currently pursuing a PhD in Islamic thought and civilization from the International Islamic University of Malaysia. So he's I think a real celebrity. And the fact that he's here at this conference, not at some other conference, because this is a really worthy cause. You can talk now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry for doing that. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعدوان على الظالمين والعاقبة للمتقين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. SubhanAllah, out of the people that are here, there are a lot of people that are here that can speak to this experience in such a profound way. And there are certain things that that experience allows for us to at least be able to be in the proximity of someone else's pain and at least get some sort of an idea of what it must be like. But we can never truly internalize what it's like not just to be one of the people that's falsely and unjustly imprisoned, but the family members of those people. I'm going to just share a few thoughts about this cause, and I want to first and foremost root it in something that's not directly related, or an experience that's not directly related, but it should resonate with us, at least when we're talking about the families of the people that have been devastated by this injustice. Dr. Betty Shabazz, the wife of the late Malcolm X, the Hajj Malika Shabazz, rahimahullah ta'ala, obviously when her husband was murdered, many people don't know, they had 4 daughters and she was pregnant with twins. So 6 daughters when Malcolm was murdered. 4 daughters with her, 2 in the womb when he was murdered. It's a miracle that she didn't miscarry those twins with everything that was happening at that point. And there was one sentence that she said about her experience after the death of Malcolm. She said, "The community treated us like lepers." The community treated us like lepers. That's a disturbing sentiment to hear from the wife of someone who is celebrated in a very sanitized form in our conferences and our conventions today. That we were treated like lepers. And I do believe that that's the experience of the families of many of the people that are here today. Some of them that I have the blessing of knowing personally and being friends with, and some of them that I don't. But our unfortunate reality as a community is that when things like this happen, everyone goes into complete self-preservation mode, to the point that we're not even willing to say the names of people that would have otherwise been highlighted in our programs, otherwise been celebrated as great leaders only a week or 2 before. Suddenly we back off and we don't even say their names anymore, and their families no longer are treated like our brothers and sisters in the community at all. And this was, of course, the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, that all of us should say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-jubni wal-bukhl. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from being cowardly or for being stingy. And those two things go together, being cowardly or being stingy, because when a person is called to charity and they don't give for causes that they know that are worthy, they go into self-preservation mode. And when a person has jubn, when a person has that trait of being cowardly, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, when they see something that they know that they should be speaking about and they don't say anything about it, then they are also going into self-preservation mode. And this starts from a very basic principle that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us, a person that would be raised on the Day of Judgment, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would take to task. And I'll qualify this by saying that most of our tradition praises silence. The vast majority of our tradition praises silence, long silence. You can find numerous quotes from the Salaf, from the pious predecessors, about people that are silent. Hikmah, most of wisdom, is silence. Luqman al-Hakim, Luqman the wise, most of what he's praised for was his silence. When he spoke very little, but when he spoke words that were of extreme benefit. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir falyaqul khayr aw liyasmut. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let him speak well or be silent. Silence is a praiseworthy trait most of the time in our deen. But there are people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take to task for their silence. Because sometimes silence makes you as complicit as one who's speaking untruths. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us a man that would be raised on the Day of Judgment, and he would be asked, why didn't you say what you should have said? And he would say, Ya Rabb, khashaytu nas, oh Allah, I was afraid of people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's answer is, Wallahu haqqu an takhsha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more worthy of being feared than people. This idea that we should say what we know is truth, even when there could be very real ramifications and consequences to them. Unfortunately, in our political reality, simply expressing disgust at the mistrial or the scam of a trial, the sham of a trial, when we're talking about the Holy Land Foundation, is criminal. Simply saying the name of Afia Siddiqui is criminal. Questioning the way that people are dealt with is criminal. Demanding justice, demanding fair trial, demanding that people's bare civil liberties are given to them is criminal. It's dangerous. You can't say that. What's Muslim about that, and what's American about that? You know, where are our faith ideals, and where are the ideals that we supposedly stand upon, or that we supposedly stand for as a country? Demanding that people are treated fairly and demanded that people are given a fair chance. It goes back to what the Prophet ﷺ told Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu to answer Abu Sufyan on the day of Uhud. And I want you to imagine that scene, and this is, we have to speak to our spiritual tradition first. I want you to imagine that scene on the day of Uhud. It's has the capacity to be a permanently, a permanently crippling event. It has the ability to demoralize the community for good. Think about the scene when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is told to call out to Abu Sufyan, Allahumma mawlana wa la mawla lakum. Allah is our protector. You have no protector. Allah is our protector. You have no protector. There is something that comes from knowing that you're saying something that's true, and there's a sense of fulfillment that cannot be taken away from a person, no matter what cell they're put in, no matter what circumstances they have to undergo, if you know that you're speaking truth. And if you are settled with the idea that you are upon truth, and therefore anything that comes with that truth, you're willing to face and bear. One of the most emotional experiences I had, and look, I've never been in prison. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us. Ameen. May Allah protect us. That we don't wish for evil. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was, or it was Sa'id ibn Jubayr was told, if you don't fear Hajjaj, or if you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is protecting you, why don't you go jump off a cliff? He said, we don't test Allah, Allah tests us. So I'm not wishing for bad or harm on anybody. We do our best. We do our best to stay out of harm's way. So I've never been in a prison cell. I've done prison da'wah, I've visited people in prison. I've never actually been inside as a prisoner, and I haven't had that experience. One of the most emotional experiences in my life was I did what's called the Mandela pilgrimage. So I went through all the different places that Nelson Mandela was in. And after just spending a few moments in each one of the Mandela stations, his cell, and going to the Apartheid Museum, going to his home, and really kind of immersing myself in that experience, I was like, my God, how do you survive 2 decades of this and still smile? How? But there is a certain satisfaction that comes with knowing that you are suffering for doing the right thing, for saying the right thing, even if that means that it will come with consequences. And so when we talk about people that take principled political positions, stances, here or abroad, and it's becoming, more and more dangerous to do so in the world that we live in today. More and more dangerous to take principled political stances. For clergy, for the average individual, for activists, it's becoming more and more dangerous. We have to resist by insisting upon our right to do so, and by insisting on our right to be treated fairly by a system. And when we are not treated fairly, by putting our trust in the one who has assured us that on the day of judgment, la dhulma al-yawm, no transgression, no oppression will be tolerated on that day. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is all just. We know that there will come a time where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take al-zalimeen to task. He will take the transgressors to task, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support those who are wrong. That doesn't allow us to submit ourselves to escapism and our own responsibilities to advocate for people and to not lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said that there is a verse in the Quran that is, it's like an arrow through the heart of an oppressor, and it's also comforting. It is a great comfort to the one who is oppressed. وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Your Lord does not forget. Your Lord does not forget. The question is, do we forget people? Allah doesn't forget people. Allah does not abandon people. Do we abandon people? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not stop monitoring one who is in a state of wronging someone else or oppressing, whether that's a government or an individual. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not unaware. And Allah does not forget. وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. But do we forget? Do we abandon people? Do we shy away? Do we treat people in our community like lepers? People that have given their lives to the service of others, Muslim and non-Muslim, people that have stood for justice, but only find silence when they expect others to stand for them. How often does that happen in our community? And what did the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam say? إِنَّ النَّاسَ إِذَا رَأَوْا الْمُنْكَرَ لَا يُغَيِّرُونَ أَوْشَكَ أَنْ يَعُمَّهُمُ اللَّهُ بِعِقَابِهِ. When people see evil and they don't do anything about it, then they all become drenched in its consequences. The entire community. What good has shined away from those that have been unfairly targeted done for our community? How many people has it protected, or has it put our community in greater harm's way because of our refusal or our insistence on not organizing around these things, but instead trying to duck and hide and duck and hide and duck and hide and hope things will get better and hope things will get better? I'll share with you one more, just because of Malcolm. We spoke about him a lot today. And subhanAllah, there's one thing from his autobiography that I just love about his character. And you can truly see that people are crafted, and people are polished stones, gems. And from a very early age, one of the things about Malcolm was his stubbornness. And subhanAllah, the beautiful story about when he's standing in front of his mom and his brother's there, and Malcolm used to stand there and insist to get fed. And his mom would tell him, his mom said to him one day, you know, why don't you stay quiet? Or why can't you be quiet just like your brother? You know, instead of insisting on being fed, he would insist. He'd stand there in the kitchen and he would insist on getting fed. And he said, I realized from an early age that if you wanted to get something, you had to make noise. I got it from an early age. I looked at my brother, he was quiet, he didn't get anything. I recognized from an early age, even as a child, if you wanted to get things done, you had to make noise. So he got that as a child, and guess what? He got it as an adult as well. He made noise. And I recognized that it can, you know, that it's a scary place. It's scary to be Muslim right now in the 21st century, anywhere, to be committed to your faith. It's frightening to many to live in the Trump era. You know, none of us saw it coming. But you know what? لا تحزن إن الله معنا. It sounds very simple. It sounds cliche. But it was enough for Abu Bakr from the Prophet ﷺ. Don't grieve. Allah is with us. Allah is with us. Stay upon the truth. Support those who are upon the truth. Support their families. Don't treat people like lepers. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. No one of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. Allah is in your cause so long as you're in the cause of your brother. You would hate for that to be done to your family. There is nothing more hurtful than to have someone that used to talk to you, that used to call upon you all the time, and now you're calling them and they're not answering the phone. They're nowhere to be found. That pain is far greater than the pain of the physical pain, than being punched in the mouth. It hurts to call upon people and to not find an answer, to find silence, complete silence from people that you thought you could depend upon. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا, your Lord is not forgetful. I know that, we have families from Brother Shukri and Brother Ghassan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. And I'll never forget Sanad, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on her. Allah yarhamha. One of the most beautiful souls I've ever met, who unfortunately passed away, and her father was not able to be there at her janazah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunite them in Jannat al-Firdaus. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunite their entire families in Jannat al-Firdaus. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them happiness and grant them ease, and allow for the happiness that all of them receive in the hereafter, to do away with any hardship that was faced in this world. We look forward to that day of justice. We certainly believe in a Rabb and a Lord that's not forgetful and a Lord that's most merciful, but we also have to do our part. I understand that there's no actual fundraising tonight in the true sense of the word, But I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that every single person supports this organization and gives words of support to the families of those that are treated unjustly. And all we do is we demand that people have a right to be treated with fairness and justice, just as we would want that for ourselves. And we insist upon that right, not just for people that are close to us, not just for community leaders. We insist upon that right even for people that have done us wrong. We insist upon that right, that people be treated with justice and with fairness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help those that have been treated with such injustice. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be ourselves people of justice and to stand for justice for others. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use us as those who would work His adl, His justice on this earth. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectify us and rectify through us and guide through us. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
I think you should sit up on that chair over there. They can ask questions later on, right?
Yes.
Okay. Got one thing right. Okay. Next, we have voices from family members of justly incarcerated political prisoners. Miriam Abu Ali and Ikraan Abdurahmān. Miriam Abu Ali is a program director at NCPCF. She's born and raised in Northern Virginia, and she graduated from Georgetown University, where I also graduated from, with a major in government and minor in Arabic. Miriam's involvement in civil and human rights is very personal. She has been advocating on behalf of her brother, Ahmed Abu Ali, a victim of torture and extraordinary rendition, and a U.S. political prisoner for over a decade, sentenced to life in solitary cell. And our second speaker is Ikraan Abdurahmān. She's an activist, poet, and junior in college, double majoring in English, literature, and ethnic studies. Based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, she's also worked as a behavioral therapist. She has been passionately advocating on behalf of her brother, Zakaria, an entrapment victim who was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2016, and speaks about the detrimental effects of CBE policies on the Somali community in Minnesota. So please come on up. I don't know if you both want to come at the same time or take turns.
I actually heard the Qadi say وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ as I was walking here. So Allahumma ja'alna min as-sabirin. I am the sister of Ahmed Abu Ali, and I was 14 years old in 2003. It was the month of June, and I had just come home from taking final exam, so I'd come home early to find more than half a dozen FBI SUVs parked in front of our apartment building. And although we lived in an apartment building, I just knew immediately then and there that, as the Muslim family in that building, that they were there for us. All the Muslim kids on the school bus had been talking. There was like a big buzz going on about homes getting raided in Northern Virginia, and people were afraid. So there was definitely a sense of fear in the community, and I had no idea then and there that Ahmed had been detained, but I'd later come to know that. Ahmed was a student at the University of Medina, and he was 22 years old when he was arrested while taking a final exam. He was tortured over the course of 3 days in Medina, and then he was transferred to a prison in Riyadh where he continued to be interrogated for 47 days, tortured and interrogated until they forced him to read a written statement, or what's also known as a coerced confession. And that coerced confession would later become the cornerstone of the U.S. prosecution against him. Still, after having obtained that confession tape, Ahmed remained in Saudi custody without charges for over 20 months. And during this period, the U.S. government would not take responsibility for his detention, and the Saudi government would not take responsibility for his detention. So, nevertheless, Ahmed remained in Saudi custody, and my family started reaching out to human rights organizations who decided to bring forward a habeas petition in U.S. court. So on December 16, 2004, which was nearly 2 years after his detention without charges, the judge ruled in our favor and ordered what's called a discovery. And he noted that there was, quote, at least some circumstantial evidence that Abu Ali had been tortured during interrogations with the knowledge of the United States. So at this point, we were overjoyed, and we thought, this must be an end to our nightmare. But our nightmare just would be prolonged, and 2 months later, the U.S. government decided to bring Ahmed back and charge him with federal terrorism charges. And the evidence presented against my brother was the confession tape that was obtained through torture while he was in Saudi custody. So my brother Ahmed was sentenced to 30 years, even though, in the words of the trial judge, Ahmed's actions did not result in one single actual victim. The government appealed the sentence. So they were not even happy with a 30-year sentence, despite the fact that, not a single person was affected by these so-called charges. And Ahmed was resentenced to life. So since the beginning of Ahmed's detention by Saudi authorities in 2005, so since he was brought back from Saudi Arabia, Ahmed was immediately put under something called special administrative measures and held in solitary confinement. So this was even before the trial had happened. Ahmed has been in these conditions continuously since then. His SAMs seal him off as much as a person could be isolated within a prison, and it severely limits our communication with him. The measures have devastated my family in every way. So I wrote this piece over a year ago to describe the impact Ahmed's imprisonment has had on my family. And it was in March when Ahmed had turned 35. Today, my brother Ahmed turns 35. He could have graduated from college. He could have started a career. He could have met a woman and fallen in love. He could have started a family. Instead, he has spent the last 13 years behind bars, completely alone. More than 1,600 miles from home, incarcerated in the Supermax in Colorado, my family can only afford to make the trip out to visit him once or twice a year. My parents receive 2 15-minute phone calls a month, either on a Tuesday or a Thursday of the last decade. Either on a Tuesday or a Thursday. My mom has spent every Tuesday and Thursday of the last decade at home, sitting by the phone, patiently waiting for a call that sometimes did not come. And when the call does come, what can one even discuss in 15 minutes? Do you ask him how he's doing? How can you even ask him how he's feeling? Do you discuss his prison conditions, his legal case? How do you break the news to him when his aunt or grandfather has passed away? How do you comfort him knowing he was denied any chance to even say goodbye? Every phone call and every visit is a traumatic event. A constant reminder that our government will go out of its way to break the prisoner, his family, and loved ones. Breaking the prisoner has been a constant theme in the U.S. criminal justice system. Last month, I had the opportunity to visit the infamous Alcatraz. Upon reaching the solitary confinement unit, I overheard a young man telling his friend, Can you imagine people had to live in this space day in and day out? I don't have to imagine. This is Ahmed's reality day in and day out. It is the reality of thousands upon thousands of prisoners in U.S. prisons, including adolescents in juvenile detention. I stepped inside one of the dark solitary confinement cells during the tour and realized Ahmed is housed in a cell not very different from the ones at Alcatraz. Even in Alcatraz, solitary confinement was used for a maximum of a few weeks. Ahmed has been in solitary confinement in the Alcatraz of the Rockies for the past 11 years. Rather than progressing towards a more just and fair society, our government's use of solitary confinement has been expanding and becoming routine. I walked out of the prison into the courtyard, sick to my stomach. The bright California sunlight nearly blinded me. I felt broken and defeated. I prayed and cried. But prayer is not enough. Justice must be demanded by us. We must hold our government responsible. I spoke to the wife of a prisoner recently. He spent 8 years in solitary confinement. 3 months ago, he was finally transferred out. After 8 years, he was finally able to have contact with his family. No more plexiglass windows separating them, he was finally able to hug his daughters. Solitary confinement and general population are the difference between, quote, heaven and hell, as another former inmate told me. But after 8 years in isolation and deprivation of human contact, he's having a hard time acclimating. He has anxiety attacks, he has difficulty coping with the social stimuli. This is what our government does to more than 80,000 human beings. It deprives them of all sensory stimuli and human contact until they become anxious, depressed, and suicidal. They strip them of their humanity, they break them down, and in the process tear apart their families. How can we allow such injustice to happen around us? How can we allow any human being to suffer the monstrosity of isolation for years and decades? Humans are social beings. To strip them of this right is not only cruel and criminal, it is inhuman. It is a human rights violation, and it is without a doubt a form of torture, and we must put an end to it. We visit Alcatraz now a dozen, We visit Alcatraz, now a designated historic landmark, as if it were a relic of the past. But I lay in bed every night and my heart feels heavy with an unspeakable grief, knowing that my brother still languishes unjustly in prison and in isolation. And every time I write about what my brother and my family have had to endure, I feel vulnerable. I open my heart and I allow the world to see my pain, and I am met with deafening silence. I try to imagine my brother in his cell. Can you imagine spending all the years of your youth in a room the size of a closet? Can you imagine receiving your food through a slot in the door? Can you imagine being strip-searched and shackled at the hands, waist, and legs when you leave your cell to go to the recreational area or the visitation room? Can you imagine being stripped of even an iota of dignity? My world caves in and I can't breathe. I'm not done. And then I begin to pray as I have every single night for the past 13 years, even on the days when my faith was shaken to its core, unsure and wavering. But today it is more firm and resolute than ever. I need it to be. I forced myself to feel a sense of renewed conviction. I am still here. I can still write. I can still fight. I will continue to channel my pain until my brother is a free, victorious man. I think about this quote by the author Yasmina Khadra with respect to what the government has done to Ahmed. They can take everything you own, your property, your best years, all your joys, all your good works, everything down to your last shirt. But you'll always have your dreams, so you can reinvent your stolen world. I will keep dreaming of a world where Ahmed is free and where my family and I can help reinvent his stolen years, life, and world. I will also continue to dream of a world in which every human being is afforded their human dignity. I'm fighting an uphill battle, but I constantly remind myself of the words of the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. We have on this earth what makes life worth living. And for me, the fight for justice is still always worth living for. Thank you.
Actually, I have a question for Sister Megan. What's the latest? I know Ahmed's case reached the Supreme Court at some point, and they heard it, or they chose not to address it, if I'm not mistaken. But is there any other petitions, or are there any other possibilities for any other petitions, for any other parts of this case that can be reopened so that injustice can be resolved?
Well, currently the CCR, the Center for Constitutional Rights, Currently, the Center for Constitutional Rights is handling this case, but they're working on his conditions more than anything until something can be done about the rest of his case.
Yeah, that must cut out.
Yeah, it's choppy. Sorry about that.
You can go up to the podium.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the delay. TSA agents and cases like these. Really something. I'm really honored to be here tonight with all of you. My name is Ikraan Abdurahmān. I am the sister of Zakaria Abdurahmān, one of the young men who was arrested in Minneapolis, April of 2015. Since he's been sentenced, this has been a tremendous journey for me and my family, and we have dealt with very many things since. And one of those things has been CVE, Countering Violence Extremism, which is a program that was initiated in 2011, and it was targeted for 3 main cities, and this is Boston, Los Angeles, and my home city, Minneapolis. This program, it aims to deter U.S. residents from joining violent extremism groups, and it by bringing the community and religious leaders together with law enforcement, health professionals, teachers, and social service employees. And so if you look at this program from a surface level, you might think, why is this problematic? First, it is because it is administered by the Department of Justice, which is also responsible for prosecuting federal crimes, and you could definitely see the double jeopardy in something like that. And because it targets, so number 2, it targets one religious and ethnic group and it alienates as a byproduct us and stigmatizes us. And so in the Twin Cities we have a very dense population of Somali Americans. And it's been tremendously hard with this implementation of the CVE program. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that as we go. And so here's an example. Essentially, if you had this program in a certain city, you could have a kid who is attempting to portray his religiousness, or even as a cultural garment, wear a thobe to an after-school basketball program, just as an example. And he would be subject to to scrutiny and surveillance through this program. And because there is such subjective criteria for what makes someone radical, administrators of this program would essentially jot down this kid's name and write it down and pass it to the DOJ as a potentially radical kid in the making. And there's plenty of examples of this. It isn't just in after-school programs. It is you sitting in a community forum expressing your opinions. It could be you praying at the masjid and perhaps you're prolonging your salah. You're doing like a little, like a khatira in a close-knit group, and you never know who in that group is an informant, a paid informant by the federal government. And it's something that has gotten, it is a primary thing that has gotten my brother arrested. The use of informancy is a very oft-repeating, almost mantra, to be honest, in Minneapolis, and it's the use of informants that tears apart our tight-knit communities and creates disunity, a lack of trust, and decreases the ability for a community to grow wholesomely. And so you can imagine when you're sitting, at a Jummah and Khatib has to censor his khutbah and refrain from speaking of modern-day politics, or even like explaining to children and Muslim youth what the real meaning of jihad might mean. They have to censor themselves as a mechanism to keep their safety and their family's safety, and you can see why this might be problematic. The scholars in our societies are meant to be people who guide us, are meant to, they're meant to mend us when a tragedy hits home, but out of sheer fear and, out of lack of safety for themselves and their families, they refrain, and that does a disservice to the community. Because then the youth are guided by impulse and not reason. And then a byproduct of this program is also our masajids are no longer safe havens, and this is something that is, wallahi, if you were to come to Minnesota, subhanAllah, we have like 60 masajids, 60 plus actually, it isn't just 60. And none of them, all of them are devoid of one thing, like a foundational, powerful, moving force of the youth. That's not present any longer. And I grew up in the masjid. My parents, alhamdulillah, have raised me, around the people of khayr. And so it's hard to see that throughout my life, the amount of, the decrease in kids being able to come to the masjid and express how they feel to a khatib without, to an imam without having, all of these insecurities in the back of their head. What if this person is gonna, tell the FBI on me, or and obviously, the idea is that obviously youth aren't coming to the masjid to, address their radical notions all the time. But in the case that they want guidance or advice for someone who has the knowledge to give to them, there's a lack, and there's fear, stigma, and fear in the community. A primary example of this would be like when my brother got arrested with his friends. It was a couple days before sentencing, and if you're not familiar with the case, my brother generally hung out with about 9, 10 boys. They all went to the same high school. They all used to hoop at the local masjid right next door, Dar Farouk. They all went out to eat in the middle of the night, all went out to the gym, and just normal, casual things. And they were infiltrated by one of their classmates who prompted them to voice their concerns about different videos he showed them, and all of this he had on recording. And of course, I want to say your freedom of speech is very much limited when you are someone who is, black and Muslim in this country. And this is something that, honestly, on my way here, I've experienced firsthand. And over time, the recordings piled up. These young men were very passionate about the different issues that have been going on in Syria and how the civilians were being annihilated and all the different things that were going on there. And they expressed their concerns, thinking that their friends would not be the ones to essentially warp their stories. My brother is now serving 10 years in federal prison. This is one of the lowest sentences. SubhanAllah, we have Habri Ayan with us here, who has 2 young men, 2 of her boys, one serving 10 years and the other serving 30 years. And none of them are older than 20 years old. None of them, even started their lives. They all had ambitions, they all had goals. And this is something that has been taken away from them. And so, going back to the problems with the masajids not being a safe haven after it's long tangent. Essentially, and I'm going to be very transparent with you guys because, for one, I think this might be an issue that happens in a lot of respective Muslim communities, and this is something that I want to portray because, SubhanAllah, I just feel like being truthful with our own problems is a step forward to change. But if we're just going to hush and keep them under the covers, it's just going to stay this pretty much the same, and that's not ever helpful. So when my brother was getting sentenced, we tried to make a night of prayer for him, and we went and asked a bunch of different masajids if we could host a night for dua, and if we could pray salat al-qiyam there over the night, and just kind of remember that the will is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands, and regardless of the sentence the following day, that we would remain strong through it all. All the families were present, and we asked at least 5 masjids, and every single one turned us down. And they said that they didn't want to speak of terrorism or anything affiliated with terrorism in the masjid, and that we should find another space. Of course, this drove away so much of the youth who were acquaintances and friends of these young men. And finally, alhamdulillah, Imam Abdurahmān, who is one of the best imams in Minnesota, so props to him, gave us his space to do that night of remembrance for these young men. But I would like to say that there are, very many stigmatizing, very many tribulations that continuously bring havoc into our individual lives. But it's really up to us as Muslims to stay united through these, tribulations, through these things that essentially attempt to disunite us. So that's just kind of like a rundown of what the CVE initiative and the program is that was that they attempted to instate in the state of Minnesota. And as we all know, and I'm sure the parents of all the victims here could vouch for this, that there is no code or no 101 manual on how to become radicalized. It's not something that exists. And so for if there is no single way to reach this, this stereotypical radical Islamist, then there is no one way back. And it's hard, but alhamdulillah, like our community has fought it. Like our CARE Minnesota has been on top of the game with the CVE program. 20 or I think 25 different messages signed off on not wanting CVE to be targeting the Somali American community in Minnesota. So we've kind of been on top of it, alhamdulillah. This is something that's still being pushed by the U.S. State Attorney. It's still something, it's an ongoing battle, and it sometimes feels like an uphill battle. But this is pretty much where we're at right now. It's not something that's going away, I'm sure, anytime soon. And even then, they attempted to like warp the name and make it like something that's a little bit less stigmatizing, but still for essentially the same community, and that didn't pass by as well. So without making this too long, I just hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to keep firm, and He allows us to become resilient communities who strive for khayr and unite despite the efforts that continuously attempt to disband us. And I hope, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us patient through our tribulations and makes it an expiation of sins for us, rewards us in full measure in the abode that is eternal. Jazakallah khair for allowing me to speak with you guys. I know it's kind of hasty and I'm out of breath, but it was very nice getting to know all of you. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. I want to introduce Sabri bin Kahla, who was actually a friend of Ahmed's in Saudi Arabia. He was also a student at the University of Medina. He was also detained in 2003. Unlike Ahmed, he was actually brought back to the U.S. immediately, and he was indicted in association with a paintball case. He was acquitted on all charges, but I believe several years later, the FBI was still in pursuit of him, and they charged him. They brought charges of perjury, and he was sentenced to 10 years, and they got that sentence using the terrorism enhancement guidelines. He served all 10 years. He's been in a halfway house from 2015 to I believe 2016, and he's here with us today. So please welcome Sabri.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I didn't plan to speak, but I didn't know if the sister was going to make it in time, so I was going to say some words because I was motivated by Sister Mary and Brother Omar, mashallah. Like she said, we were very close friends actually, and a week before, we both were held in secret prisons in Saudi Arabia, so a week before our incarceration, we were actually at a wedding together, and we were just like, subhanAllah, beautiful. We just finished our last classes, in Jama'ah Islamiyya in Medina, and it was a very nice time. It was like a cool breeze in the air, and we were discussing about us getting married and looking for our future and everything like that. And subhanAllah, within a week he was incarcerated, taken. We didn't know why, and I started to pursue it over there and try to find out why. And then a couple days after that, I was incarcerated and put into a secret prison for over a month or two. I didn't know why the whole time I was there. That's when you really know your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I wanted to give good tidings. Like Brother Hatib, he is here as well. He was incarcerated and he's out. And I'm here standing before you, I am out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ونبلوكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين. Like Allah will test you, with fear and your life, basically, and a decrease in your life or a decrease in your provisions, and give the good tidings to those who are patient. We have to be patient. This whole dunya, at the end of the day, will feel like yawman or ba'da yawm. That gave me great comfort in those times. I was in solitary confinement, maybe over, if you count them all together, almost 2 years sometimes. Put in a cell by myself, with, in the middle of winter with air conditioning being put on me. And I would remember these ayats, and it's just, the whole life is just yawman or ba'da yawm. And that gave me great comfort. So no matter what happens, inshallah, there will be an account, there will be justice. And we'll look back on all of this as this less than a day, like a couple hours gone by. Never lose hope. As a brother Omar was saying, don't turn your back to your brothers. If you're doing right and you're not doing wrong, you're not a criminal, don't be afraid. Don't fear them, but fear me if you are believers. Right? I never once, alhamdulillah, but despite, and this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He protected me. I didn't bow my head. I didn't, easily go and bear false witness against other Muslims to save myself, because I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's in charge of the affairs. Right? Nothing can harm you except if Allah allows it. Nothing can bring you benefit except if Allah allows it. So if you stand for justice, this organization, mashallah, they supported me throughout, their time of existence until now. And that meant a lot to me. A colleague of Brother Omar, Sheikh Yasser, I didn't know he was so popular. We studied together in Medina. Mashallah, he's very popular now, but he never refused a phone call. He never refused the email. He always got back to me. I found that very heartening. And those that he talks about, when you say you feel bad when some people, they kind of cut you off, it really didn't affect me too much. I just realized who are the true, sincere friends and who are those who are faking it. They kind of just made it easy for me. So I felt more disappointed and a little bit disgusted with some people. And alhamdulillah, many people stood by me throughout, alhamdulillah, but just a few, took that route. And alhamdulillah, may Allah forgive them. They probably were scared or they felt fear or whatever. But in reality, it just gave me comfort to see who really stood by me this whole time. So I encourage you all never to lose hope, to stand by your brothers and sisters in justice, and inshallah, support them as much as you can. Writing letters means a lot. Like she's saying, when you're isolated in a prison cell by yourself, that letter is like a touch of the outside world. It gives you some comfort. And it doesn't take much to do. It only takes a couple minutes. But it means a lot to those who are still in prison. And also, most importantly, keep them in your dua. Don't give up with your dua. Allah will answer it regardless. If in this dunya or in the akhirah, He'll preserve it for you. We should never lose hope. Always stand firm for justice. Don't fear except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I thank you all for coming out and letting me speak. I'm sorry it might have been rambling. I wasn't prepared to speak, but she really motivated me, and I wanted to give you guys some hope. I'm standing here in front of you. I got out. I made it. Like they said, I was bloodied, but I did not bow. Alhamdulillah. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all stand strong for justice and keep our heads raising high, because you are Muslim. Antum al-a'lawn. You are the high road. Kuntum khayr ummatin. You are the best of nations. We have a great, beautiful treasure that we should share with mankind. Don't be scared. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum.
We have the 10 minutes or so for question. They got a new microphone. Still cutting out. That's fine. Always. Always want to do that. I have a question, actually, for Ikraan. I don't know. So this was like one of your brother's friends who, did they put up to it, or did they just go and they told someone, oh, I heard this guy saying this, or were they sent in for this purpose?
No, so initially he was.
So now you're all to solve, no problem if it works. MashaAllah. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Cool. So, yeah, initially he was just one of the friends, and the FBI locked him up for a couple of days and told him that he was looking at 30 to life, and then gave him the alternative to be an informant, and that's the route that he chose.
What was your brother actually charged with?
He was charged with material support, conspiracy to attempt to aid and abet terrorist organization. Sorry.
Conspiracy to provide material support or material support and conspiracy?
No, just materials. It's conspiracy to aid and abet
Still choppy, sorry.
Okay, yes.
Hello, Jazakallah khair for coming. I have two questions, if I may. Keep them very short. But just for the panel and maybe specific for Sister about CVE. I know it's been mentioned that it's started in 3 cities, Minneapolis, Austin, and LA. Do you know if it has expanded since? And the second question is related to the community element from the CVE, as there are, as mentioned, masajid and community leaders that are actively supporting it. Have they taken a different stance? Is our community still supporting it? What can we do to bring more awareness so that our community leaders don't actively participate in bringing entrapment to people that don't obviously have different intentions? Jazakallah.
Okay, so yeah, the question was, first of all, have these CVE efforts expanded in the cities that they were in? And two, some communities have taken good positions towards CVE, some communities have taken bad positions, and have communities' positions changed? Do I want to answer it? I can tell you what I know.
Speak loud into the microphone.
Thanks, Ahmed. Why are there always people pointing stuff out that I have to do? He's replacing microphones, he's telling me to speak louder. Okay, basically, I mean, it's very interesting, and sometimes it's just my impression, you might disagree with me. Living in the DC area is kind of misleading about, like, I think here, you know, if you go into a group of Muslims and you say the word CVE, probably a bunch of them will be like, yeah, CVE is great. Because they're actually working for CVE organizations. And then you get, you know, a voice like, oh, this is terrible. And I go to another city, for example in Los Angeles, if you go say CVE, everyone gets up and leaves. I mean, I know the Muslim organizations in Los Angeles about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they basically got together, they all agreed we're not going to take any CVE money, and we're not going to participate. And then earlier this year, beginning of the year, actually very beginning of the Trump, end of the Obama administration, early Trump administration, it was in the list of grantees who have been given money by the Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security. Some of them were in these LA organizations whose leaders had previously said, we're not going to do this, and they immediately had their feet held to the fire, and they all gave the money back. So, what? Which ones have not? MPAC, yeah, okay, yes. MPAC has not given back money. Thank you for correcting me. What's your name?
My name is Hannah.
Thank you, Hannah, for correcting me. One of the organizations gave the money back. Diyanet Institute. So what I mean is that I think this really varies depending on where you are, and this area here is sort of like, I hope, not representative. Do you have anything to add to this? What about the attitude of the Muslim community in Minneapolis? They've been fairly consistently anti-CVE?
Yeah, so for the vast majority, the vast majority of the Muslim community has been averse to the implementation to taking any grants or any money from CVE to initiate or to implement the CVE program. But it would be a lie for me to say that it was across the board. There have been a few groups who have taken grants and who have attempted to do like after-school programs, tutor programs, and this is, subhanAllah, actually within the Somali community as well. Those organizations have been absolutely, completely boycotted. We do have a very strong, college, like the MSAs are really strong in Minnesota, alhamdulillah. So they've been kind of at the front and center with ousting and calling out these different organizations and calling them out for what they are. So everyone is aware of what organizations to avoid and what organizations, to place their children into if they wanted the services without the surveillance or scrutiny. So.
Next question.
Okay. My question is going to be for Sheikh Omar, but before I pose this question, I want to say, first of all, to everyone here, alhamdulillah, that so many of you on relatively short notice came out and we have a nice crowd here. Information is power. Tonight is just the first night. This is the introductory night of what is going to be a very empowering experience for those of you who come back tomorrow. So please come back tomorrow, bring others with you, inshallah ta'ala, and you'll greatly benefit. And I know the families who have been impacted will be empowered even more by you showing consistent support for them. And I'd like to say to the families, just a reminder, most of them already know this, but and those who didn't know it outright, they learned it through experience. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he said, a calamity that brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is better for us than a blessing that causes us to forget the remembrance of Allah. So, there's a very silver lining to the storms that have affected the individuals and families through all of this madness over the years. It's not exclusively post 9/11, but especially post 9/11. And there is a lot of barakah in this, and so we just have to be patient and continue to strive. My question to Brother Suleiman. First of all, it's in two parts. Just came to my attention yesterday when I saw the program that a sister sent my way. She said, Brother Salakan, I wish you were here at this program that took place yesterday in D.C., the WISE program. She said you would have a lot to say. And it was too late for me to get there, but I asked her to give me some background information on what the program was about. She sent me the program. So I saw the program, and it was, to say the least, very interesting. Some of the characters and some of the issues involved. Am I wrong in presuming that the focus on extremism was extremism emanating from the Muslims, not from the other side? That's the first question. And I'd like to also know what your impressions were, given that you were there, of the overall program. That's number one. Number two, and this is the most important question. I'm going to put a little pressure on you, brother. Good pressure. Inshallah. I have a lot of respect. One of the frequent questions I get as I go around the country doing this work, and I've been doing this human rights work in America for over 25 years. Why aren't more of the leaders in the organization speaking out? And you already touched on that, but my specific question is, we know that it comes down to a lack of faith and a greater fear of created things and a fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it at the end of the day. That's the bottom line. My question is, why are so many of our brothers and sisters who are the repository of sacred knowledge not addressing these issues, not boosting the faith reserves of the community, and what can we do in order to get them to do their duty in helping to boost the reserves of leaders who are the presidents of boards and the imams and what have you that are not measuring up in this very challenging time.
I was expecting a harder one, man. Said part two, you were going to squeeze. Part one, Brother Mark, yesterday, are you aware of what I said when I was at the summit?
No, I wasn't there.
Okay, well you could look at the hashtag and you could see the comments that I made when I was there. I was invited. I did not shy away. To my knowledge, it was not a government organized program, and it seemed like there was a diverse group. I didn't attend, and this is full disclosure. Jack knows because he picked me up, Dr. Brown. I didn't attend a single panel other than mine. Meaning I literally went there, said salam, I spoke, I sat on the panel, I sat on, Mahdi Hassan moderated it, I said my part, I listened to other perspectives, and I left. The points that I made yesterday were actually about the fact that we should not focus on ideology, but focus on legitimate political grievances, and speak to those political grievances and state-sponsored injustices and brutality, whether that's a despotic government of the Middle East or our own injustice. So I wasn't, I'm not going to speak on behalf of any of the other panelists or anyone else that was there or any other perspective. I will represent my own position though, and my positions were transparent. I believe the program was recorded. It can be found online. I don't know where, but it can be found online. So I'm happy to defend any comments that I may have made if you think I said something that was unjust, and I appreciate pressure. I do think our leaders, and I'm not claiming to be one, I think that we should put people on the spot and demand answers. Mashallah, when you came down for Dr. Afia Siddiqui and raised awareness, in my masjid, Hina Zuberi, may Allah bless her as well, told me to make sure I posted about the demonstration. Unfortunately, I was out of town that was held outside of the prison in Fort Worth. We do need to do more. I think that, look, there is a heightened anxiety. Let's be real. It's a heightened anxiety. It's not just on the part of the leadership. It's on the part of our community as a whole. I think that we need to speak to the fact that silence has gotten us nowhere. Complicity, full complicity, has not gotten us where we thought it would get us. We just brace ourselves and just hope that we're not next. We have to be proactive in challenging the system and challenging brutality and challenging abuse of civil liberties. And I think that that comes through a process of education, working with people, inshallah ta'ala, trying to, and it takes a few people to put pressure on their colleagues. I'm certainly happy to represent anything I've done or said and have a productive dialogue or discussion about those positions. I'm not perfect, I make mistakes. Honestly, I apologize if I've ever been a part of hurting someone or putting someone else in a detrimental position. I hope I have not been. This is very deep and personal to me because some of the families are close, very close to me. That doesn't mean that, that doesn't excuse if I fail to maybe use my platform. I can speak from my platform, maybe use my voice in a more effective way for certain political prisoners or certain cases. I'm happy to be challenged and be told, hey, you need to raise your voice on this particular person right now. They're not getting any attention. Because that's something that I think we need to do, but I'm not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes. I need to be held in check. And I appreciate when you do that. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah bless you for putting pressure on us. We need that pressure. Everyone needs that pressure. And I pray that we always do what's right, even when it's unpopular or when it comes with its consequences. So I appreciate you. Jazakallah khair for keeping the pressure on us always.
Assalamu alaikum. I hope my question is not that difficult, but I want to thank everybody for having the courage to even hold this forum, and for those of you on the panel. I am Fazra Dean. I'm the outreach liaison for Dar al-Hijra in Falls Church, Virginia, and I'm here with some of my friends and sisters and brothers, including Brother Sal. Erring on the side of precaution and balancing being proactive, because Sheikh, you just mentioned being proactive. As an outreach team, we're receiving calls from the FBI. They now have an outreach team as well. And the State Department has what's called community relations. Should we, and then the sister mentioned about the youth not wanting to come to the mosque. How do we balance this? Can you give us some guidance?
You're asking me?
Yeah. And that one's good.
Qualified person. I don't know if I'm the most qualified person. I'm sure that there are probably 20 people that are more qualified than me in this room to answer that question about how to engage. In fact, Ahmed's sitting right there. Bring you up here right now, and you can answer the question. Hey man, you mess with Dr. Brown, he mess with you too. But before he answers, I'll just say this: that I think that whatever table we're brought to, whatever we're asked to engage in, whenever we're asked to speak, we have to be true to our community's grievances, and we have to be willing to amplify voices that don't typically get heard in some of those spaces. So that's all I'll say on that, and I'll probably let Ahmed and anyone else who's an expert on FBI community relations address that question.
Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed Badir. I'm not an expert, but I've had my fair share dealing with the FBI. And when the FBI comes knocking on your door with outreach, you're not there to bring cookies and roses. If they do, the mission of the FBI is to arrest people, right? They're supposed to go out and find crime, eliminate crime, and catch the bad guys. So when they're coming there to do outreach, it's not, to issue a happy Eid. It's to find bad guys at your Eid. And if there aren't bad guys, unfortunately, there's a lot of pressure on the FBI themselves to find the terrorists. After 9/11, they had a paradigm shift. Before, like regular police officers, law enforcement, a crime takes place, they go in and they do the investigation, follow the evidence, catch the bad guys. After 9/11 happened, they had a paradigm shift and said, we could no longer wait until the crime takes place, like 9/11. We have to find the bad guys, arrest them, put them away before they actually commit the crime. And that's the problem. How do you find criminals before they actually commit the crime? And that's where thought crimes come in. They started thinking, well, if you thought about the crime and you fit certain criteria, that's good enough to put you away because it's too risky to keep you on the street. The problem with that is when they use paid informants, people who were drug dealers in the past, people who violated their immigration, people who were blackmailing with certain things, people that they pressure and force them to become informants, and they tell them you're either going to stay in jail or you help us catch people, and they have to produce. So if they don't find terrorists, they help create terrorists. And unfortunately, they prey on young people, they prey on the vulnerable, they prey on people who are mentally unstable, and they radicalize them. They don't actually just find bad guys, they find somebody who's willing to become a bad guy and play their part, and they'll spend resources and years and millions of dollars to turn that person into a radical. In fact, until they're able to participate in the fake plot. The way you deal with them is there's a power imbalance in place. When they come knocking and say, you know what, you're not coming in here because we know about your CBE program. We're not going to participate and work with you until the FBI headquarters eliminates the CBE program. Stop targeting our community with these programs. Stop treating us like criminals. And if we take a united stand, all the masajid, all the communities, without the people that are selling out, without the people that are willing to take a seat at the table for, some sort of position, if we all take that, they'll have to have a different approach. But as long as we have community leaders and activists and people that are getting on the payroll that are willing to play the game, as long as we continue to be divided, they'll find ways to penetrate, infiltrate, coerce, and find ways to arrest more of our young people and put them away. Let's face it, at the end of the day, if a white kid commits the exact same crime and they're not Muslim, they get a slap on the wrist, they get probation, they may get 1 or 2 years, but they don't get 30 years in jail for never even picking up a single weapon, just for nodding their heads as the informant shows them videos. And we've seen this. So we have to be more informed. We have to make sure that we protect our children. We have to know that when somebody comes into our communities and starts talking about, Anwar al-Awlaki, Osama bin Laden, all these trigger things, jihad in Syria, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. That's not an ordinary person, that's an informant. Stay away from that person, because that person is going to only get you in trouble. That person is on the payroll, because no sane terrorist is going to come and start talking like that in the mosque, right? And what happens is when they actually just focus on these young people that are not terrorists, the real terrorists, like the guy that's in Orlando, gets away with it. The real terrorists, the ones that in California, get away with it, even though they crossed the path of the FBI investigated them, and they still can let them continue to be out there, but they prey on our young people, and they, by focusing on these young innocent people, they take resources away from the real bad terrorists. So at the end of the day, when terrorism happens in our community, we should blame the FBI. You didn't protect us. Not enough people are asking, how is it that the Orlando shooter shot so many people when there's so many signs? And they failed. We need to put more pressure, but we have to work together. The other thing that we have to do as far as engagement is put pressure on our members of Congress. Those members of Congress, senators, they have the purse. They distribute money to these law enforcement officials. If we put enough pressure on them, it's not good enough just to go out and rally and protest outside a jailhouse, right? That's good, but it's not enough. We have to go and talk to the congressperson in that same district and say, this is unacceptable, and if you continue to vote for more funding for these unconstitutional programs that target our community, we're going to make sure we vote you out of office. Because we don't need any more un-American people that violate the Constitution and prey on our community just because we are Muslim. And finally, the final word I want to say is we need to support organizations like this organization, the National Coalition. This is a beautiful turnout, but not enough Muslims in the community are aware of the problems. We need to fund this organization. We need to make this a priority for our community, because if we don't stop it, if we don't actually do something about it, more and more of our young people are going to continue to go into jail unjustly. Many of our community are behind the Black Lives Matter, and we should be. But before we can help Black Lives Matter, we have to make sure that our kids are not suffering in jail. The same injustice that's targeting the Black community is targeting the Muslim community. We can build alliances with them to make sure that they address our issues as well. So, congratulations for having a wonderful program, but it doesn't stop here. Let's not just come here and cry and then go home and do nothing. Let's go back home and organize. And if your mosque, like the mosque the young lady mentioned, if they're not willing to adopt these issues, we have to put pressure on them as well, lobby, and make sure that that imam is no longer the imam of that mosque. Rally people in that community, put pressure on the board, shame them, to make sure that those people are not cooperating and putting our young people at risk. And at the end of the day, we have to be able to have these mosques as a refuge, especially for dua and prayer. It's unacceptable that you would go there and ask so many mosques and all of them turn you away. And it's not to the point that even people who are suspected of being terrorists, and then when they die, when they're dead, the mosques are refusing to even do a burial service. As if somehow that these people don't even, and then churches, imagine this, in some cases, people that were killed that were suspected of terrorism, of course they're dead, so they were never brought to justice. The mosque would refuse to do a funeral service for them, and it's churches that actually are stepping up and offering these funeral services for them. So what does that say about our community? We have a lot of work to do, and it starts with us, and we have to make sure that we push these issues so it becomes a priority for our entire community. Thank you so much.
I think there's plenty of time for kind of informal
discussion. Yeah.
But we're out of time, right? What? There's 50 people.
I think we would have one last question. We're over time, and then we can, people come and ask questions, discuss things. We're here now.
Yeah, family members.
Yeah, I have to get to those other people. I don't even know my own.
We have one last question though for the.
Alright,
I want to say, Brother Moody, I was at the conference and I can say one more thing that Brother Omar Suleiman has said, talking about how to prevent extremism and how to fight it. One of the issues that you have addressed, and by the way, I've written it, and hopefully I will be able to distribute, was extending friendship hand to the Muslim world and saying religion of Islam is religion of peace. It's not enough without coupling it with policy. That was beautiful, and no one has talked about it in that conference. I was waiting the whole day someone to address that. So for you saying that yes, Islam is not it's a religion of peace, but of course you added saying stop bombing the Muslim countries. Now I have a question for the two sisters, Sister Miriam and Sister, I'm sorry, I came late. One, Ahmed Ali, subhanAllah, when he was, our community in Northern Virginia, we have suffered, especially Darvita. We have lost so many men after 9/11, some of them still in prison. And only Allah knows how that community has suffered. I remember we stood in front of the State Department with my two little kids, and we held the sign saying, "Free Ahmed Ali." And we still waited and hoping when he was brought from Saudi Arabia that he would be released and justice would be served. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So we need to know how to help without creating more problems for Ahmed. That's one for you. And for you, I was in Somali doing humanitarian work when this happened with the Somali boys. And I know one of the imams who was also a lawyer who was involved in this, Sheikh Hassan Jamil, the FBI went after him. We need to know as a community, what can we do to help the Minnesota community, because I know the FBI has used the division that existed within the community and exploited that. How can we unify the community so nothing like this happens, and how can we help the families? And one last thing that I want to say, there were two questions, is what can we do to address the issue of the FBI coming to the homes, because not only do they come, but they enter the homes. People are not educated. No matter how many times you tell them, know your rights, we have done so many programs. Families are still inviting FBI in. And we should not do that. Once you invite them in, if they see anything, because they look around, then they find a reason to come back with a warrant. So that has to be talked about.
And remember, by the way, anything you say to them, they can say you're not telling the truth, and then you've committed the crime of lying to a federal agent.
Absolutely.
Right? When you add terrorism enhancement to that, you're going to be in prison for 10 years. So if someone ever comes to you from the government, you say, give me your card, I'll have my attorney contact you. That's it.
Thank you.
Sister, I think my family is truly blessed to have been part of the television community who really rallied behind my brother, supported him, and has really gone above and beyond, not just with du'as, but with fundraising efforts and support, financial, emotional, all the way until this point. There are people who consistently message me asking me about Ahmed, and that really means a lot to me and my family. If you asked how to continue to support my brother, and my answer is to support this organization, the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, because while there may not be anything that can be done legally to support Ahmed at this point, there are so many other prisoners who need our support. And where Ahmed is my brother and the son to my parents, for many of these families, the person behind bars is the father and the breadwinner. And with that loss, it is so much more difficult for those families. I know families who have not been able to visit their loved ones in years because of financial difficulty, children who have not seen their fathers, mothers who are now on welfare, or have really just been devastated in even worse ways than my family has been. And so one of our programming every year is Ramadan Fund, where we support the prisoners and we deposit money into their canteen funds. And we also plan on having programs where we help support families to go visit their loved ones. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, sure. So you asked about Hassan Dame, and alhamdulillah, like, he did face a little bit of trouble with supporting this young man, but we do need more people like him in Minnesota. Wallahi, he's been one of the figures of pretty much power, regardless of the controversy or how unpopular what he said was. He did talk about, what the real meaning of jihad was, and the MSA that he visited on campus did a reclaim your narrative, reclaim your Islamic vocabulary. So we took back, phrases that have been misconstrued in the media, like Allahu Akbar, and what jihad means in terms of like internal struggle versus what the media portrays it as war, and things like that definitely do help, and we do honestly need to support our imams and our shi'ah who want to speak the truth, right? Oftentimes they have no backing, and so when something happens to them, everyone just kind of leaves them out for the wolves, and so then everyone else decides that they're not going to speak about anything because they don't have that community backing or the support to be able to say something without having it misconstrued and then, be a cause to be arrested. You asked how to support the young men. Right now, we're attempting to raise funds for their educational purposes. A lot of the young men have been in there ever since they've been subpoenaed and arrested initially in 2015, and all of them were attending college at the time, and they want to continue to do this. Each course is like $500, almost $600, and that's per credit. So it does get really hard with 10 young men, involved. So we're attempting to raise funds, and perhaps you and I can speak about that afterward. But I guess I would like to end with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, right? Like that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never help a people unless they help themselves. So I'd encourage all of you guys to stop taking, allowing our people to take the back burner and get the brunt of what happens as a result of standing out and saying the truth, and support them in times of tribulation. There's a saying, right, like that, I think a Somali proverb that my mom always says, like, dip into which basically means when tribulation is away from you, it is knocking on someone else's door, and eventually it will get to you. So if you haven't been an ally for someone else, you can't expect them to be an alliance with you when you are facing conflicts.
I know we're already over time, but just something recurring. We're over time, so I should just not say
it. Yeah, just you can say your last piece and then end it.
My last piece. I think it's important for Muslims when you're doing anything, no matter who you're talking to make sure that it's public and that you're being transparent and that you're speaking the truths of the community. The problem is when a lot of these things happen behind closed doors, and people double speak, and and it's take care of one group and things of that sort. Be out in the open. Be transparent. Don't say things in one room that you're not going to say in another room. Don't say things to one group of people. It sounds very simple, but it's actually very problematic. Be consistent with your positions, whether the person sitting in front of you is a government official or whether the person sitting in front of you is an aggrieved party. Just be consistent with your positions and be open and transparent, not alone, not behind closed doors, none of that backdoor stuff. All right, we've got enough conspiracies that are floating around. I think that is a reasonable ask of the Muslim community, and it's a reasonable ask of our leadership. It's a reasonable ask of everyone. And if backdoor conversations are taking place in a way that's detrimental to the community, that does need to be called out. So no matter where you stand on some of these issues, but still, we can demand transparency, we can demand accountability, and we can demand consistency on the part of our leadership. And I think that's a healthy demand, inshallah ta'ala. It's a reasonable demand, for everybody.